On March 28, 1945, the rain in Karen Hills, northern Burma presses down on the canopy like a physical weight. The jungle absorbs and swallows sound. Even the aircraft above seems unsure of itself, engines throttled back, circling once more because the opening in the trees looks wrong from this angle. Somewhere below, mist sits in layers, and water runs down leaves thick as leather. The men inside the aircraft were waiting. Neither of them speaks now, nor do they check their kit again. Everything that can be adjusted already has been. The only thing left is the timing. When the light flashes, there will be no pause, because hesitation in a night drop costs more than broken bones. The cost is separation, radios smashed on rocks and men landing alone. The light came on and there, they went on. Parachutes snap open. Too low for comfort, but low is safer than drifting. The jungle rises fast, branches clawing at silk, and then the ground comes up hard and uneven. One man hits a slope and rolls. Another lands almost clean and cuts himself free in seconds. Weapons are gathered. Containers are dragged into cover. The aircraft is already gone, sound fading because distance works differently in rain. The man in charge stands still for a moment and listens. Not for voices, because there will be none, but for movement that does not belong to the forest. There is none yet. That does not mean safety. It only means delay. His name is Edgar Peacock, and he was 51 years old at that time. The men around him know his rank, but not know his age. They do not know that the paperwork that brought him here was falsified, although those details belong to him alone, and he keeps it because he must. The war has no use for honesty when honesty would have prevented a successful mission. This is not a conventional battlefield. There are no front lines here, no trenches to take or hold. Control exists in movement and denial. Roads, tracks, villages are important. Whoever controls information controls survival. Peacock has come to break Japanese movement across an entire region because the Japanese are retreating, and it means compression. It also means columns forced into narrow paths, and narrow paths can kill armies. Somewhere to the south and west, the British 14th Army is advancing. General Slim wants momentum, and he wants the enemy unable to regroup, reinforce, or escape cleanly. This drop exists to make that possible. The operation has a name, but names do not matter on the ground. What matters is speed, because delay gives the jungle back to the enemy. Peacock signals for the men to move. They melt into the trees, because standing still is more dangerous than noise. The ground here slopes into a series of ridges, and ridges give sight lines if you know how to use them. He knows. He has walked terrain like this for most of his adult life, although not as a soldier. As they moved, rain soaked everything. Radios were wrapped and unwrapped again. Maps soften at the folds. Leeches appeared without warning, and nobody reacts because reacting wastes energy. Everything here in the jungle drains you slowly. Somewhere ahead, guides are waiting. Karen fighters. Local men who have lived under Japanese occupation. They will not greet this party with a ceremony. They will look, assess, and decide whether these strangers understand where they are. Respect here is not granted by insignia, nor by accent. Peacock reaches a small clearing used only because it cannot be avoided. He pauses again. Neither he nor his men have been seen yet, but that does not mean they will not be. At night, sleep comes in fragments. It always does. Peacock wakes with pain in his head that never quite leaves him. The old wound makes itself known when he is tired, and fatigue is constant here. He waits until the pressure settles enough to think clearly, because orders given under pain are often wrong. Army regulations did not want men like him, not at this stage of the war. Younger officers were available, and younger bodies heal faster. Paperwork exists to enforce that logic. So Peacock altered his. He changed dates. He adjusted records. He became 5 years younger on the page, and that difference opened the door. He had a family, land, built a farm with his own hands in Africa after leaving Asia, and knew what it meant to settle. Nevertheless, the war reached him anyway. The Japanese invasion of Burma was not abstract to him. It had names attached to it. Places he had known for decades were now occupied. Forest tracks he had walked alone were now patrolled by men who did not belong there. That mattered. Age brought him experience, but it also brought limits. He could pace himself longer than most, but when fatigue took hold, it refused to lift. He managed it by discipline. He did not rush or waste effort. Younger men often mistake speed for effectiveness. He did not. There's another reason he keeps his age hidden. Authority in irregular warfare is fragile. Guerrilla units survive on confidence. Doubt spreads faster than fear. If men believed their commander was too old for the jungle, they would begin to question decisions, even good ones. That could not be allowed. The Karen fighters arrive before dawn. They come quietly and in numbers that are hard to count at first, because they do not bunch together. They watch Peacock and his men closely. They note how they carry weapons, how they move through undergrowth without breaking branches, and how little they speak. Introductions are brief. Translation moves through several layers, but meaning survives. The Japanese are active. Columns are moving north and west. Supply dumps have been shifted. Roads are being repaired because retreat requires infrastructure. Peacock listens. He does not interrupt. He asks questions only when clarification matters. He has learned that asking too many questions in front of local fighters looks like ignorance, but asking none looks like arrogance. Neither is useful. He explains what he intends to do and promises that information will be acted on, because intelligence that goes nowhere is worse than useless. It gets people killed. The Karen leaders exchange looks. They have heard promises before, and many were broken. But they also understand leverage. British aircraft can strike targets they cannot reach. British radios can call in that power. That right there matters. Peacock's understanding of this terrain did not come from maps. It came from years spent walking forests when nobody was watching. He arrived in Burma long before the Japanese did, not as a soldier, but as a forestry officer. The job was supposed to be administrative. It was not. Forestry in Burma meant distance and danger. It meant managing land that fought back. It meant tigers that learned of villages and returned again and again, bandits and rebels who understood the same paths, nights alone in places where sound carried badly, and light meant vulnerability. He learned patience, when to move, and when to wait, how men behave when they think nobody can see them there. That knowledge transfers easily to war. In 1931, during the Sayasan Rebellion, that knowledge nearly killed him. The uprising forced government officers into direct conflict with guerrilla bands. Peacock was wounded badly during that period, struck in the head. The injury did not heal cleanly. It left scars that pain would revisit for the rest of his life. That wound did something else. It taught him what risk felt like when it went wrong. He never romanticized danger after that. He respected it. He prepared for it. He accepted it only when the alternative was worse. When he left Burma in the early 1930s, he did not leave it behind in his mind. He carried its lessons with him to Africa, where he built a farm and attempted a quieter life. He married. He had children. He planned a future that did not involve radios or parachutes. War does not respect plans. When it came, he tried at first to stay away. He had done his part, he thought. But the war expanded. Asia burned. Burma fell. Reports came back of occupation, of forced labor, of villages emptied or destroyed. He read them and recognized places. At 47, he decided. He would go back. The army tried to stop him politely. Age limits existed for a reason. He went around them. He altered records. He accepted junior roles at first, because entry mattered more than status. He served in artillery units. He trained others. He waited. Someone noticed. Experience like his was rare. Most officers sent to Burma had never lived there. They learned quickly or died. Peacock did not need to learn. He only needed to remember. In March 1943, the call came. Special Operations wanted him, not because he was young or fit, but because he understood how a regular war actually worked in that environment. He accepted without hesitation. Training followed. It was demanding, but not unfamiliar. Demolitions, communications, organization. He absorbed it all. The jungle had taught him more than any manual could. He passed assessments because competence shows itself even when bodies age. When he returned to Burma in 1945, it was not the Burma he had left. War strips places of subtlety. Forests were scarred. Villages were quieter in the wrong way. Roads were used by people who did not belong to them. Occupation changes the rhythm of life. Peacock did not comment on this aloud. He stored it. Emotional reactions cloud judgment. Judgment mattered more than sentiment now. The operation he was part of had clear aims. Raise local resistance. Deny the enemy freedom of movement. Feed intelligence to higher command. Disrupt logistics. None of this was glamorous. All of it was decisive. He was given responsibility over a large area, far larger than the number of men under his direct command would suggest. That was normal. In this kind of war, influence mattered more than presence. The Karen fighters would do most of the fighting. His role was to shape, coordinate, and amplify. He began by listening again. He identified leaders who understood discipline and restraint. Not every brave man makes a good fighter. Recklessness kills allies as easily as enemies. He selected carefully, because selection determines outcomes. Training was brief and focused. Ambush drills, withdrawal discipline, use of terrain, timing. He did not try to turn guerrillas into regular troops. That mistake had been made before. He taught them to remain what they were, but sharper. Early actions were small. A patrol here. A supply dump was destroyed there. A road cut at the wrong moment. These actions forced Japanese units to slow, to bunch, to react. Reaction creates vulnerability. Radios became the center of everything. Intelligence flowed outward. Air power flowed back. Targets were struck not because they were impressive, but because they mattered. Bridges, convoys, repair crews. Nothing demoralizes an army like being attacked while fixing yesterday's damage. Japanese patrols increased. Pressure rose. Peacock shifted bases frequently. He never stayed long enough to be predictable. His men learned a rhythm. They learned that success depended on constant movement. Physically, the cost mounted. The jungle took its share. Leeches, infections, exhaustion. Peacock's old injuries flared. He treated them when he could. He ignored them when he had to. He did not complain. Commanders who complain lose credibility quickly. The Karen fighters watched him closely. They saw that he moved with them. They saw that he accepted the same conditions. They saw that his decisions reduced casualties among them. That mattered most of all. Trust solidified. As weeks passed, reports accumulated. Japanese movements were increasingly constrained. Larger formations hesitated. Routes once considered safe were avoided. The jungle was no longer neutral. It had taken a side. Peacock understood what this meant. The operation was entering a new phase. Disruption was becoming decisive. Somewhere ahead, the enemy would attempt to break. When that happened, everything done so far would be tested at once. He did not know the numbers yet. He did not know how historians would later summarize this period. He knew only that the jungle was working, and that the strain on his body was growing. Nevertheless, he continued, because stopping now would waste everything already paid for in blood and exhaustion. April in 1945 settled into Burma with heat that arrived early and refused to lift. Rain still comes, but it no longer cools. It steams. Clothing stays wet for days, and skin breaks down where fabric rubs. Movement becomes a calculation, because speed costs water and water costs exposure. Peacock understands isolation now in practical terms. His area of responsibility stretches wider than anything he can see from a ridge. Radio contact with higher command works, but only intermittently, because weather interferes and batteries degrade. Neither reinforcements nor extraction exist as immediate options. Whatever happens here must be handled here. He keeps his base deliberately unimpressive. No fixed perimeter. No clear paths. Tents appear and vanish. Fires are rare and small. Smoke travels too far in still air. Japanese patrols have learned to read signs quickly, because desperation sharpens attention. The Karen units disperse after each action. Peacock insists on it. Concentration invites disaster. Dispersion preserves initiative. He knows this from the rebellion years, although the enemy now wears different uniforms and carries better weapons. Messages arrive through runners when radios fail. Information flows in fragments, but patterns emerge. Japanese columns are withdrawing from the central plains and attempting to regroup in the hills. Some are moving with discipline. Others show signs of strain. Supplies are uneven. Morale varies by unit. Peacock prioritizes which movements to disrupt. Not every target deserves attention. Small patrols can be ignored if engaging them reveals larger positions. He chooses points where pressure will ripple outward. Road junctions, ferry crossings, repair teams. The first coordinated ambush under his direction happens at a bend in a forest track used by supply carts and light vehicles. The Karen fighters execute it cleanly. Fire is brief. Withdrawal is immediate. No pursuit is attempted. The Japanese respond with caution, because uncertainty slows everything. Airstrikes follow 2 days later on a different route, guided by information passed through Peacock's radio. The timing matters. Japanese engineers arrive to clear damage and find craters already cooling. Repair becomes futile. The message spreads. Isolation remains constant. Peacock has not seen another British officer for weeks. He eats what the Karen eat. He sleeps when he can. Pain in his head returns more often now, although he hides it behind routine. Decisions still come clearly. That reassures him, because confusion would signal decline. He writes brief reports when possible. He keeps them factual. Higher command does not need poetry. It needs clarity. Casualty estimates are conservative. Overstatement breeds mistrust. Japanese patrols pass close one night, voices carrying. Peacock listens and counts steps. He notes accents. Some units sound exhausted. Others remain disciplined. That matters. Discipline determines how much pressure is required to break movement. Late April brings a shift. More Karen fighters arrive than expected. Word has traveled faster than Peacock anticipated. Success attracts participation because people align with momentum. That creates opportunity, but also risk. Peacock does not accept everyone. He screens carefully. Men with grudges often bring trouble. Men seeking revenge tend to ignore restraint. He selects those willing to follow orders, even when action feels tempting. Training expands, but remains focused. He emphasizes withdrawal as much as attack. He drills silence. He insists on spacing. He teaches them to avoid trophies. Evidence invites retaliation. Leadership structure forms gradually. Local leaders remain in place, but Peacock overlays coordination. He does not replace authority. He redirects it. That approach preserves legitimacy. The Karen understand the stakes better than any outsider. Villages pay the price when operations fail. Peacock listens when they advise against certain actions. He accepts their judgment when it is sound. Trust deepens because respect runs both ways. Japanese responses grow heavier. Patrols increase. Mortars appear near contested routes. A small Japanese unit attempts to lure fighters into a pursuit. Peacock refuses. He recognizes the tactic from earlier conflicts. Patience saves lives. Radio traffic increases. Higher command asks for more detail. Requests come for specific targets. Peacock balances demands carefully. He does not chase instructions blindly. Local conditions dictate feasibility. Air support becomes more responsive. Timing improves. Fighters appear overhead within hours of reports, not days. That shortens Japanese reaction time. Movement becomes dangerous even without direct contact. One engagement tests discipline severely. A Japanese convoy stalls after hitting a damaged bridge. Karen fighters want to press the attack. Peacock orders restraint. Airstrikes are already inbound. Ground assault would increase casualties unnecessarily. The bombs arrive. The convoy disintegrates. Survivors scatter into the forest, abandoning equipment. The Karen fighters watch from cover. They understand the lesson. Restraint multiplies effect. Peacock feels the strain afterward. His back wound, poorly healed years ago, becomes infected. He treats it as best he can with limited supplies. Fever threatens. He rests briefly, because he must, but he does not relinquish command. Neither age nor injury receives comment. Authority here comes from results, not appearances. As April ends, the scale of operations increases. What began as harassment now influences larger movements. Japanese units alter routes preemptively. Some abandon planned withdrawals. Confusion spreads. May arrived with relentless heat. Monsoon clouds build without releasing rain. The air grows heavy. Men tire faster. Equipment fails more often. Radios need constant attention. The Japanese command reacted decisively. Larger patrols sweep contested areas. Artillery appears in positions previously considered safe. Intelligence reports suggest a significant formation may attempt to break through Peacock's area to reach safer ground. This changes priorities. Disruption alone no longer suffices. Delay becomes critical. Every hour gained allows Slim's forces to tighten the net elsewhere. Peacock concentrates his units temporarily, despite the risk. Coordination demands proximity. He selects ground that favors defense and withdrawal. Ridges, narrow valleys, choke points where numbers lose advantage. He issues orders carefully. Ambush only under favorable conditions. Withdrawal at first sign of heavy resistance. No pursuit beyond visual range. Preservation of force matters more than individual success. Japanese probes test these positions. Fires exchange briefly. Contact breaks cleanly. The enemy learns nothing useful. Frustration builds. Radio traffic spikes. Higher command acknowledges the threat. Air assets are stretched. Peacock is told support may be delayed. He adjusts plans accordingly. One night, movement is detected near the main track. Scouts report large numbers. Not a patrol. A column. This confirms his assessment. A break attempt is underway. He shifts units quietly. Signals move through runners. No fires burn. Silence dominates. The jungle waits. The column advances cautiously. Engineers probe for traps. Progress slows. Peacock allows it. Delay compounds pressure. Each minute increases vulnerability. At dawn, a roadblock detonates beneath the lead elements. Fire erupts from concealed positions. The engagement lasts minutes, not hours. Japanese return fire blindly. Withdrawal begins before artillery can respond. Airstrikes follow later that day on the stalled column's rear elements. Damage multiplies. The column fragments. Peacock does not pursue. He relocates. Japanese counterfire arrives too late, striking empty ground. That pattern repeats. Frustration deepens. The cost on Peacock's body increases. He moves slower now, although he compensates with planning. Pain returns with insistence. Fever threatens again. He hides it because weakness invites doubt. Karen fighters notice nevertheless. They adjust, carrying more burden without comment. Loyalty expresses itself in action. Pressure continues for days. Japanese attempts to regroup fail repeatedly. Movement becomes disorganized. Supplies run low. Morale deteriorates. Mid-May brings rain at last. Monsoon breaks with violence. Rivers swell. Tracks vanish. Movement becomes harder for everyone. Visibility drops. Sound carries unpredictably. Peacock recognizes the opportunity. Weather amplifies disruption. Japanese units, already strained, now face environmental collapse. He orders increased activity, but within limits. Overextension remains dangerous. Intelligence reports multiply. Runners arrive soaked and exhausted. Information overlaps. Patterns confirm that Japanese forces are fragmenting. Some units abandon heavy equipment. Others attempt to disperse into the forest. Peacock prioritizes blocking movement toward key routes. He coordinates multiple units across distance, using timing rather than proximity. Simultaneous actions create confusion disproportionate to scale. Air support resumes with difficulty, but still strikes when weather allows. Targets appear fleetingly through cloud breaks. Precision matters less than presence. The psychological effect compounds. One engagement nearly turns costly. A Karen unit presses too far after initial success. Japanese counterattack forms quickly. Peacock intervenes via runner and radio. Withdrawal barely succeeds. Casualties are light, but the margin was thin. He addresses the leaders directly afterward. He does not reprimand publicly. He explains privately. Discipline survives. Japanese command appears to lose cohesion. Intercepts suggest conflicting orders. Retreat routes clog. Disease spreads. Peacock reports this accurately, without exaggeration. The numbers begin to matter now, although he does not know them yet. Casualties accumulate across weeks of disruption. Not in one battle, but through attrition. That distinction matters. Historians will later struggle to capture it cleanly. Peacock feels exhaustion settle deep. His wound worsens. Infection persists. He treats it repeatedly. Supplies run low. Evacuation is impossible. He accepts this, because alternatives do not exist. Nevertheless, he continues to direct operations. He delegates more. Trust allows delegation. The force functions even when he rests briefly. As May ends, Japanese resistance in his area weakens noticeably. Movement slows to a crawl. Some units dissolve entirely. Others surrender to local forces or vanish into the forest. Higher command signals acknowledgement. The operation's effect is clear. Larger strategic movements accelerate elsewhere. Peacock's area has done its work. He understands that this phase is ending. The war here will conclude soon, one way or another. What remains is consolidation and reckoning. The jungle grows quieter, not peaceful, but emptied of urgency. Peacock watches rain fall through leaves and considers the cost paid so far, both visible and hidden. In June 1945, the fighting does not end with a single signal or surrender in this region. It becomes thin and dissolves unevenly, because retreating armies rarely collapse all at once. They erode. Japanese formations still exist on paper, but paper has little value in flooded valleys and broken hills. Orders arrive late or not at all. Units move because they must, not because they know where they are going. Every movement leaves traces. Every trace carries risk. Peacock understands this stage well. The war here has shifted from confrontation to denial. He no longer seeks contact. He seeks paralysis. He orders his remaining coordinated actions with precision. No wasted effort. No symbolic gestures. Every operation must either block movement, strip supplies, or force delay long enough for outside pressure to crush what remains. The Karen units execute this phase with confidence earned through months of discipline. They no longer require constant supervision. They understand timing. They understand restraint. They understand when to disappear. One Japanese column attempts a night movement through a secondary route, thought to be forgotten. Scouts detected before midnight. Peacock assesses quickly. Direct engagement would scatter the column, but scattering might allow escape. He chooses obstruction instead. Roadblocks go in quietly. Trees fall. Charges detonate. The column halts. Confusion follows. Orders conflict. Dawn approaches. Air support arrives late morning. The weather clears briefly. The strike is not spectacular, but it is decisive. Vehicles burn. Supplies are lost. Survivors withdraw in disorder, abandoning equipment that cannot be carried. This pattern repeats across weeks. No single action defines the phase. The accumulation does. Peacock's reports reflect this. He avoids dramatic language. He lists effects. Delays achieved. Routes denied. Units disrupted. Disease observed. Morale assessed. Higher command responds with satisfaction and caution. They know this kind of success rarely looks impressive in dispatches. They also know it determines outcomes. Physically, Peacock is failing. Pain occupies more of his waking hours. Infection returns despite treatment. Fever comes and goes. He remains functional, but barely. He adjusts his routine to compensate. Decisions are made earlier in the day, when clarity is highest. He does not tell anyone how close he is to collapse. Authority here depends on steadiness. He provides it. Japanese resistance fades further. Some units attempt surrender through intermediaries. Others vanish into the jungle. Peacock allows local leaders to handle these cases. His focus remains operational. Numbers appear after war's end, not during. During fighting, they mislead. Afterward, they become tools of memory. Peacock does not calculate totals in the field. He records incidents. He estimates cautiously. He understands that exaggerated claims erode credibility and dishonor those who did the work. When historians later examine this period, they struggle to compress months of attrition into figures. No single battle accounts for the losses. No single commander can claim them personally. The effect is cumulative, systemic, and deliberate. Operation character, as it becomes known in records, covers a wide area and many units. Japanese casualties accumulate through ambush, airstrikes, disease, exposure, and starvation. Supply denial proves as lethal as gunfire. Movement through hostile terrain without support kills quietly. The figure that emerges later, 11,874, represents an estimate across the operation. It includes killed and wounded, and it reflects the collapse of units unable to sustain themselves under constant pressure. It is not a tally of bodies counted on a field. It is an accounting of effect. British losses associated with the operation remain comparatively low in many summaries, often cited as around a few dozen killed among British personnel, although total casualties across all involved elements, including local fighters, reach higher numbers. That contrast draws attention. It invites questions. The answer lies in method. Peacock's approach avoids decisive battles. He refuses situations where bravery substitutes for planning. He leverages air power without exposing ground forces. He allows the environment to do work where possible. The Karen fighters bear much of the risk. Their casualties matter, although they receive less attention in distant records. Peacock knows this. He ensures their contributions are noted where he can. Higher command reviews the results with interest. The operation is described later as the most successful guerrilla campaign conducted by British forces during the war. That description fits the numbers, but it misses the process. Peacock receives recognition for his role. Decorations follow. Citations mention leadership, organization, and effect. He accepts them without ceremony. Medals do not ease pain or restore health. The numbers circulate. They grow cleaner with repetition. They become headlines and summaries. Peacock rarely comments on them. He knows what they represent and what they omit. For him, the important measure is simpler. Japanese movement stopped where it needed to stop. Slim's advance continued. The war in Burma ended faster than it might have. That is enough. The end of fighting does not end consequences. Peacock feels this immediately. When operations wind down, adrenaline fades. Pain remains. Infection deepens. The wound on his back worsens. His head injury flares unpredictably. He grows thinner. Sleep becomes erratic. Medical evacuation finally becomes possible. He resists it briefly, because habit holds him in place, but logic prevails. Others can manage the remaining tasks. Removal from the jungle feels disorienting. Noise returns. Structure returns. The body, long driven by necessity, begins to fail in new ways. Recovery proves incomplete. He returns to civilian life altered. Family reunions lack ease. Years of separation and strain have changed relationships. He finds it difficult to explain experiences that resist compression into stories. Recognition follows, but it feels distant. Public acknowledgement cannot bridge private distance. He attempts to resume farming and normal routines, but health limits him. Energy wanes. Pain becomes chronic. Treatment options remain limited. The old head wound continues to trouble him. The back infection leaves lasting damage. He endures quietly, because endurance has become a habit. Those who meet him later describe a man diminished physically, but unchanged in bearing. He does not boast. He does not seek attention. He speaks plainly when asked. The war has taken more than it gave, although it achieved its aims. Peacock understands this balance. He does not resent it. He accepts it. He died in 1955, 10 years after the Jungle War ended. He is 62. His death passes without spectacle. The world has moved on to new conflicts and concerns. Only those who know the details understand what has been lost. Legacy forms slowly and depends on who remembers and who records. Peacock's story does not fit easily into simplified narratives. It lacks a single dramatic moment. It lacks a famous last stand. It resists myth. Historians later revisit the Burma campaign and recognize the importance of irregular operations. Operation character receives renewed attention. Analysts examine how small forces influenced strategic outcomes through coordination rather than confrontation. Peacock's name appears in that context, not as a lone hero, but as an organizer who understood terrain, people, and pressure. His age becomes a footnote of interest. His decision to lie about it becomes a symbol of determination rather than deception. The Karen fighters' role gains recognition slowly. Their contribution becomes clearer as records expand. Peacock's insistence on noting their effectiveness proves valuable. The numbers remain striking. They circulate because they challenge assumptions about force and effect. They provoke debate about how wars are fought and won. Peacock himself does not shape this legacy. Others do. He is no longer present to correct or embellish. The record stands on its own. What remains is a pattern worth noting. Experience mattered. Restraint mattered. Understanding mattered. Neither youth nor numbers alone determined success. Coordination did. The jungle, indifferent to intentions, rewarded those who learned its rules. Peacock did. His story endures not because it flatters, but because it instructs. It shows how wars can be influenced without spectacle, how leadership can operate quietly, and how cost extends beyond victory. The date of his first drop remains a marker. March 28, 1945. A moment when an older man stepped back into a place he knew too well, carrying knowledge, pain, and resolve. The jungle took its toll. The war took its toll. The result changed history in ways difficult to see at the time. That is enough to remember.